Listeners of the Randomness of Nothing podcast, this is your host, Rashad Woods. I've always been intrigued by people who have carved out their different paths, niche, and explored different avenues. Zachary Kuhl is here today, and he is a career coach, talent strategist, and he's here to give perspectives on what it's like to be in that career transition mode and highlight some of the nuances behind the AI that's behind the hiring processes. So I want to thank you very much for your time from the great state of Minnesota.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you reached out to me and I was looking at your background, right? And I think that, this show has always cultivated a great relationship with creatives, entrepreneurs, and people who have stepped outside of the proverbial box of life. And you've done that.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say.
Thank you. So please just get some insights on how that path took you.
Sure. So my background is primarily in talent acquisition and recruitment. I had worked in the hospitality industry, and then when COVID hit, had moved over into go-to-market, so a lot of sales and high-growth organizations. And through that transition, we saw the entire world get turned on its head, right? The rise and fall of remote work, the shift to a lot of digital first things. And it became really clear that hiring practices as a recruiter was never going to be the same. And so as I was watching the market move through all these things, it became even more clear that the candidates that I was talking to had no idea how to leverage themselves anymore. All the traditional pathways of trying to have the right keywords in your resume and trying to network with the right people, all of it started to fade to the side as we moved more and more into skills-based hiring, where you had to actually prove that you knew something. And it was less about your degree or who you knew or anything like that, and more about what you could actually do and how you could show that in a very short amount of time.
Right.
And so as more of that started to happen, I started doing what I would call a little bit of hand-holding with candidates. If I really liked someone who I was trying to get on board with the team, I would coach them through the interview process, which as a recruiter is not standard. And it became pretty clear that there was a few things I was telling everyone to do. And so I decided to say, let's try a little bit of a coaching business, put together the first guidebook that's called Push, which is 6 tips and exercises that people can actually just do on their own to start to work through that transition on their own. And then eventually moved into career coaching full time.
That's amazing. What is now obviously anybody who's read the statistics has found out that it's been very brutal, in particular for college graduates within the last 2 to 3 years. As 15 years ago, when somebody had a computer science degree, it was like the equivalent of having Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, little golden ticket. But now it's, now it's basically like you're just another number when it comes to being in the cog on that. So have you found out that your client base has changed as the market has evolved?
It's definitely changed a lot. So when I first started, mostly just by word of mouth and freelancing, we were dealing with a lot of people that were trying to get sort of to that next level. They had hit some sort of proverbial ceiling. They couldn't get the promotion. They couldn't get the job or the next title that they wanted. And it was more about leveraging their existing assets. And it's shifted much more now to younger folks, but still a good amount of what I would call adult learners as well. People who are going through that debate of, should I go back to school? Should I sign up for this boot camp? Should I get this certification? Because in a skills-based hiring economy, if you don't know anything, it's really hard to leverage, if you haven't done anything, it's hard to leverage skill base. Whereas knowing it, but not having physically done it is a real big issue, which is a lot of the research that I've been focused on actually the last year. On top of the book, I've also published a research paper, and it talks a lot about this AI gap, basically. And so there's this thing called the iceberg effect, which was the name was penned by MIT. And right now, AI is currently capable of performing something like 11 or 12% of the tasks in the US workforce already, which is about $1.2 or $0.3 trillion of wages. And so there's this entry level cliff where if you've never done something before, these entry level roles are disappearing. And so we have to now work with clients to develop some sort of skill, whether it's through volunteer work, through personal projects, something like that, to actually show that they can do whatever the thing is to get them past entry level. And that's much more difficult.
So people are looking at this, and I have a tendency when it comes to AI, people all of a sudden, pump the brakes, so they get very concerned. But having said that, there's also a lot of course correction that companies tend to take. And I say that because everybody always latches on to the high visibility. Everybody has to be all in on things. And they've shown in the past that sometimes that doesn't work. It's like when everything went all in on streaming, and then some people found out how difficult streaming really was, and then there was consolidation in the market. There were companies that weren't successful. They had to merge because they realized there wasn't an ROI. Do you find out that there's a bubble, so to speak, that even though everybody's all in, there's going to be a natural clawback when they find out it's not for every industry?
So the term bubble, I'm cautious to use because I'm not an economist. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
But there's usually, I'm working on a follow-up book right now, actually, and I've found this term that's called, actually, funny enough that you said the clawback, called the Great Clawback. Where if you look back historically at any of the major innovations that have come across America since the Industrial Revolution, there's this big boom and then there's this big shrink back.
Right.
And so the example that I found that I'm going to be using going forward is this pneumatic mail tube system in New York City. Okay. So those tubes that you use at the bank, if you go and you like put your debit card, whatever, sends it through. Right. From the 1897 to the early 1950s, there was this big boom in New York City of pneumatic tube systems, and it was used primarily for mail. The U.S. Postal Service got involved. It was this big thing. They'd use these massive canisters to send like 300 letters at a time through New York City, and it was, the mail of the future. The car hadn't been popularized yet. Paying people to deliver the mail was cumbersome. People would steal it and all sorts of stuff. And there started to be all these issues that took a while for people to catch on to. One was they had to pay rent to the city to actually run the tubes under the streets. 2 was the maintenance cost. Yeah. 3 was the amount of times that people would just send tubes down the same, or they send canisters into the same tubes and it would cause explosions.
Oh my gosh.
And so people started to see the safety concerns and the cost of this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was the dominant mail delivery system for the biggest city in the United States for almost 60 years. And it just started to tumble back to finally what its practical application was, which is delivering lab samples in hospitals and delivering documents inside of offices.
Right.
I think we're going to see that.
Okay.
AI is not going to be the grand replacement forever, but we're seeing right now is this huge investment into something that a select few people are betting their life on, for being honest.
Of course.
And it's eventually going to reel its way back to what is actually possible given the processing power and the energy needs and the sort of universal good it can actually provide.
And the reason I say that is because, every grocery store was all in on self-checkout. And then there was a story, there was a CNBC article, right? And I think I want to say like some grocery stores in even some mom and pop ones, right? And there was long story short, some stores clawed back on the amount of self-checkout because people wanted personalized service. It was taking too long. The motion machines were very expensive. They found out that, it'd be better to have the time that it took to have somebody code come in, swipe, type in. It was leading to a lot of consumer frustration. So I think there's going to be a happy medium involved with technology versus people. And we've all been
some sort of balance.
And we've all been that person in that line where you're like, all I wanted was 3 items, and this is taking me 15 minutes because now I got to press this bleep, bleep screen, and then bleep, bleep happened, and then now I'm angry, and maybe I just leave my items here because it's not worth it, right?
Exactly.
That's funny. So let's talk about specifically with what industries are coming to you that are hit the hardest when they're like, Zach, I need help. I'm trying to break into this field, but I'm hitting that proverbial wall, ceiling, or I need to be more well-rounded in my skill set.
So it's a lot of what we're seeing in the layoff news, if we're being honest. It's folks who are working in sales, customer support, basically any sort of a white-collar job that was a part of the remote boom is now seeing a lot of uneasiness about themselves. The folks who have worked in like computer science and things like that, they're on the forefront enough that most of them can sort of navigate what the next steps need to be on their own. But it's the people who have been in these positions that are very human centric that are starting to get anxious. Yeah. And so that's sort of the biggest concern, right? I mean, a robot can't really replace that sort of human interaction. It can to a degree, but when you are getting into this sort of a market, what a lot of what we're doing now is going through and leveraging or helping people leverage those skill sets that they have working in human-centered industries and trying to get them tied to modern skill sets that they need. Are you using AI in ways that are making your time more valuable? Right. Are you being able to focus on more productive projects? That way you are more of a super user, which is a term I hate, but it is
the cliche, the cliche nomenclature. Yeah,
exactly. But if you can show that you're actually utilizing the thing that you fear, it's a lot less scary, and you become more valuable to your team as being someone who actually understands what's coming next.
I would say the first thing is like customer service representatives, right? Like, so when you're calling in, that 1-800 number, like even the chat box, like they're encouraged, even if you try to like Amazon, for example, right? The first thing you want to do about something is that, hey, the chat box can answer all your questions. Then you want to call, then it's the chat box that says punch in. Every company's all in on that because that's quote unquote the low hanging fruit, so to speak, of the first entry point of not having a room of 250 people answering phone calls from people, right? It's a frustration point for the consumer, but they have enough market leverage that, at the end of the day, you're going to put up with it because we say so. Let's just call it for what it is, right? You really will, right? So it's something that they know is a pain point, but they're not going to use that at the expense of creating content or creating product or creating distribution channels. They're just on a Saturday, they're willing to make sure that you're going to go through that chat box instead of paying somebody, a 12-hour shift, so to speak.
No, there's definitely a lot of that going on. And again, that's one of those things where you have to have the hard conversation of, is there something in your experience that we can leverage with additional skill sets, or do you need to completely retool your career?
Right.
Because there is definitely a fair amount of that going around as well.
Do you find any industries that are kind of like, I don't want to say immune from it, but do you sit back and say, well, this is not as easy? I don't want to say easy. It's very complicated to try to do, AI-centric tools because of the skill set that's needed to do certain tasks.
Absolutely. There's two main safe havens, I would say right now, and that's going to be healthcare and skilled trades.
Right.
You're not going to be able to have an AI bot go draw blood tests or walk someone through labor or put on a cast.
Yeah.
And you're also not going to be able to have a robot who's going to, go underneath your house and replace new plumbing and do all those things. If you are really, really fearful of it and it's something that you want to not have to deal with, those are the two places that you need to try to get in.
That's really a good way of putting it, right? Because when it's a Saturday and something breaks and, or the power's out, the sewer line broke, and, for lack of a better term, it starts narrowing into very physical and capable skills that involve certifications and licensings. Those are the kind of things that are very intricate in what is needed. I love this conversation because I think this is a very important topic because, there's a lot of pearl clutching, rightfully so. And, you kind of look on LinkedIn, you see kind of the bloodbath of what takes place when people whose industries they thought wasn't going to be touched. And these people are highly skilled, highly technically savvy, highly accomplished, right? And you're like, wow, this is really tough to read because, they're trying to navigate these waters. And so I hope that they can reach out to you and maybe find that path. Now, what is your client base like as far as what you service? Nationwide, local?
So right now it's whoever, excuse me, anyone who reaches out to us, we'll do our best to assist them. We do everything virtually. I'll be honest, I don't have the best business model in the world. Most people can kind of pull themselves up through this by going through the book. It's got this exercises you need to really identify what your strengths and weaknesses are and where your opportunities are, which is the biggest one. But if you want a sort of traditional career coach to go through you with those steps, to walk you through interview prep, to assist with your job search, that's something that I'm here to do, and have got a small team that can work with me as well. Right. But the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is just sort of raise awareness to these steps that you can take on your own, because a lot of this is going to have to come down to your own schedule. Working with the traditional career coach can be cumbersome. And that's one of the first things I tell people. You're going to get billed our rate regardless once you sign this contract. And if you can't commit to the time commitments that are required on your side, you're not going to get your money's worth out of it. Right. And so if you can go through the guidebook and sort of find those opportunities for yourself and what you need to adjust on your own, that's awesome. Do that. Yeah. If you do want that extra help, we're here for it. But, if you're signing up for, a couple weeks, sort of like a boot camp sort of a session, be prepared to put in the work during those 2 weeks so you can get the most out of us that we can give you.
Right. Well, I think also too is that, people who are, of a certain age, may all of a sudden realize that, the world changed really quickly around them. And I say this because when COVID happened, and this is kind of like the naivety of people, when there's vacant buildings, when there's that remote atmosphere, companies were going to evolve very quickly to what the empowerment was. And there's a power dynamic and a power balance that was quickly going to always shift back. So at the end of the day, like at some point that was going to get clawed back, because that's a position that they're not going to be in ever, right? It's just not how their power dynamic structure works.
No, that's definitely not the funnest situation, but it's true. I mean, just in my own experience, when COVID happened, I was working in the hospitality industry, lots of high volume recruitment, trying to find temporary roles for seasonal restaurants and things like that. And that whole industry just imploded overnight.
Oh my God.
I mean, we tried to figure out what to do. And I mean, me and my team at the time, we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know how long it was going to be. And the next thing you know, our entire team was laid off because half the restaurants were closed and they needed to figure out how to make cuts. And so, I made the move into sales. Some other people made moves into other areas. Some people left recruitment and moved into becoming like HR generalists. But we're one of those functions that's generally well protected. You don't usually see layoffs in HR teams unless a company is severely downsizing. But just in our world alone, I mean, pretty much every recruiter I knew had gotten laid off in the course of a couple of months. Right. And that power structure then changed back when we started seeing those COVID checks go into people's pockets, and people were kind of starting to spend a little bit more money again. Then we saw this big hiring boom. Right. I was brought on as a consultant with a couple of startups during that time that were hiring way more people than they needed because they were trying to meet this huge demand.
And now you see the clawback now.
Ran out. Yeah. Right. And now the layoffs are happening again because they drastically overhired. There's always this push and pull. And so if you can learn how to build your skill sets and how you present them in the best way, you'll always find a way to bounce back.
Right.
But again, if you want to avoid even just the economic cycle in general, healthcare and skilled trades is the safe places to be.
And I think the challenge of that is it's not for everybody, or everybody doesn't have that, because healthcare is very demanding. Skilled trades is very demanding, right? Both are very physically intensive, both require long hours, both require high level attention, because, when it comes to those particular fields of work, you can kill somebody. Like you can literally, and not everybody's comfortable or qualified to necessarily be with patients, and handle blood and, all of those intricate things. But having said that, that certainly can help you navigate those tricky waters. What's it like when you're getting these phone calls or an onboarding process for you, for a perspective?
So the first thing that we do, or I should say the way that our system is set up, is that if you want to work with us, go through our website, fill out a contact form. We'll reach out to you with a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is going to go through a lot of information you're probably going to think is really annoying.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do with that is build a little bit of a psychological profile to get an idea of where you're at, your level of severity, let's call it, in your job search. Are you thinking about it? Are you just struggling with something? Are you going to lose your house if you don't get a job quickly? Things like that. And then from there, we'll book what we call an intro call, and we'll go through those results together, and we'll ask a few follow-up questions to build what we call your career narrative, where you've been, where you are now, where you're trying to go. Right. And that is a combination of your own personal being, your personality, your work experience, and your education, and trying to weave those three things together into the career narrative that will then build everything else on. Once we have that, we update your resume, build new cover letters, optimize your LinkedIn, we'll make recommendations for other sites that we think you should be active on. And then if you decide to take it one step further to what we call full contact career coaching, at that point, we go out and we look on job boards for you and try to help you find jobs that we think are a good fit, because we have recruiter seats on different platforms, so we can find things a lot easier than you can. And then we start to do the interview prep and meet usually weekly to walk through how many applications have we got out, who we heard back from, do we want to adjust strategy at all? And then from there, it's totally up to the client how long they want to keep that process going. Usually, if you are getting, we found on average, if you have 45 to 50 applications out the door, that usually equates to 1 or 2 interviews. So it's very, very high volume right now, unless you are a specialist. Yeah. If you are a certified accountant, if you are something where it's like you've got the big shiny piece of paper that unlocks that level, then it's faster. But if you're anyone else, it is very much a numbers game, dialing in the resume, the story, the networking, and the jobs you're targeting. That will increase your odds, but it's still very much high volume. And so we usually work with folks for a couple of weeks before they sort of feel like they've got it on their own or that they've found success.
So my question is almost like the springboard from that statement that you made. What when you have these younger people who hear these figures, these numbers, this information, it may discourage them from even going to college, right? Or pursuing it, because they're just like, hey man, listen, if that's what the market is like and that's the steps that I have to go to. You've also seen a boom like in entrepreneurship, in skilled trades, in other professions that normally would not have been attractive to people, that are sitting back and saying, you know what, I'm going to give this a second glance because I don't necessarily want to invest my time and do a 4-year degree and kind of just be this another number. And then my second question to you is, how do people navigate what's that ATS system, right? Because now it's a situation where there was a gentleman I read on MSN that actually sued, I think the guy works at Allstate now, but he said he checked all the boxes. He's like, because of his respective skill set, he was a military veteran, I believe. If he wasn't, I apologize for misstating that. But eventually he found out who the ATS system was, and then he filed a lawsuit against them because he said these algorithms are actually discriminating. So how does that work?
So as far as young people deciding if they should go to college or not, I'm probably not qualified to give advice on that.
Respectful.
I try to look at the whole picture, and if I'm talking to someone who doesn't have a whole lot of leverageable experience, that might be my recommendation. Mm-hmm. But as far as like what you should go back for, or
that's you.
Like that,
that's on the person.
That's 100% up to you. Yeah, I'm not going to go tell you to take out $40,000 or more in loans to get a degree that you might hate. But I will say the biggest thing I think is just to follow the economic markets. If you see that there are industries that are doing really well on the S&P, or you see that there are layoffs coming down the pipeline, and you can group those into different industries, that'll probably tell you a good idea what's happening in the next 5 years. As far as the ATS systems go, there's really 2 camps. So there is the legacy software, and then there's everything else. So the legacy software is things like Oracle, ADP, iSIMS. A lot of more established brands are using those. Those systems are not as smart, and so they're less likely to discriminate against you automatically. The ones that you need to be worried about are the more modern ones: Workday, Greenhouse, Leveler, things like that. And you'll see the little icon when you go to apply. If you go to apply for a job, you'll see the Workday icon or the Leveler icon, Greenhouse icon. Those pretty much all of them use some sort of scraping technology now. And there's 2 common misconceptions about scraping technology. The first one is it doesn't actually read your resume as a whole. It can't comprehend that. It's looking for keywords to either boot you in or boot you out. And the second thing is that because it can't read it as a whole, it can't actually read. So if you format your resume and you've got like a banner on the side with like your name and your picture and stuff like that, it reads like we read. It reads left to right. So if there's something that breaks up the vision, it suddenly is like, well, I don't know what this is, so it must be the next box I need to fill, and then just automatically puts it into whatever box it thinks it needs to put it in before it then evaluates you. So the smartest thing you can do is a really clean resume built in a Word document that's left to right, super easy to read.
Okay.
The second thing is try to figure out those keywords. The keywords are usually hidden somewhere in the job description. Hidden isn't even the right word. They'll be there. You just have to pay attention. If they're looking for 8 years of experience with this system, put the system in your resume. If they're looking for experience managing teams of X size, put that somewhere in the resume. It's a pain to have to customize it like that, which is why with our service, we do try to take sort of an aggregate of job descriptions that we think you're interested in and build the resume off that to limit the amount of edits that you need to make. But if you can add those keywords in and again, make it easy to read, the chances of you being booted for those things are a lot easier. Now, other discrimination factors that are not supposed to be built in, but we can't prove they're not built in, like age bias. Easiest thing to deal with that, only put your relevant work experience, usually the last 5 years. Don't put the dates that you graduated college or high school or any of that stuff. And that'll eliminate a lot of that bias.
That's really good information because, I think some people have, like I said, again, if you go to any professional networking site, you'll hear kind of the same stories from people. And I think this was a very helpful episode to be able to help people navigate, systems that, for lack of a better term, are not going to openly tell you how they're using their process. It's almost like I hate to say it, like an underworld, right? Because that usually involves like a criminal element of some sorts, but it's the thing that people don't know. Just, you know what I mean? I don't want to say but it's not something that they're going to forthcome and say, hey guys, this is exactly what we need to be looking for. You really have to do your homework yourself to be able to navigate something like that. And for lack of a better term, it requires time out of people. And maybe that's quote unquote time that they don't have or perceive that they don't have. Right. So what's the number one, first of all, where can people find Zachary Kuhl? I think this is honestly one of the better episodes that I've had a chance to have, because this is very informative to the audience that I think it wants to reach.
So if you want to get in touch with me directly, my website is strategicallyhuman.org. It's got a contact link there. It's also got links to the book and the research paper if you're interested in either of those things. And again, bad business model, but before you reach out to me, I would recommend you check out the book. I think it's on Amazon. Push 6 tips and exercises to push your career forward. It's like a $2 ebook. It's a really great place to start. If you do those exercises before you reach out to us, then it's actually a lot faster for us, and you'll save yourself some time and save yourself some money.
That's really fantastic news to hear. And I would love a follow-up episode, because I think that the human touch that people are craving right now, it's really weird, right? So people became these nomads in the last 6 years where they're like, hey man, the world kind of shut down, and then they were able to kind of do their own thing, but then they really craved human interaction and attention. But I would always say that whatever plan you have, these businesses are already thinking 5 years ahead. So while the offices were vacant, while employees had leverage, so to speak, there was always going to be a course correction that was going to take place, right? And so, at some point, it's like sports, right? There's a reason why they'll lock out the players when it comes to a collective bargaining agreement, because they feel as though the players have had too much leverage. Really, it's the owner. You see the finished product on the field every Sunday while you're enjoying your beer and your pizza, but the owner up in the suite calls the shots.
Very much so. Very much so.
Point blank, period. So I think everybody should be cognizant of that. And, it's also, sport a wave of entrepreneurship, which you yourself have been, at the forefront of for your own business.
Yes, of course. And, as we move forward too, with whatever does come next, we're going to see a lot of, I think, solopreneurship, but even in that field, you still need to know what your value is or who you're trying to build towards. Because if I decide to go start like an HVAC company, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
I'm starting from ground zero. It's going to take me a lot longer to get to anything tangible.
Right.
But, if I want to build like an HR consulting team, I can build a lot of that with AI tools for myself,
right.
Though that would be a legal headache. But I think even if in that world of, going out and trying to strike out on your own, knowing what your value is, knowing how to position yourself, not just to employers, but to clients, super valuable skill set.
I think this is, nuggets of information, right? So at the end of the day, it's all about you and how you present yourself and your respective skills. So that's what this show was created for. And I was so honored that you reached out to me and found something that my show resonated with you, that you're willing to take your time out of your day to speak.
Of course. Thanks again for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Zachary Kuhl. This is the Randomness of Nothing. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe, and definitely look up Zachary if you're looking for that insight of your career and, how you want to be the better version of yourself. Thank you, Zach.
Of course.
That was a blast.